All right, well, thanks a lot. So my name is Andrew Aguirre. I am the corporate treasurer at TD Williamson. So TD Williamson, we are a pipeline performance company. Very easy way to think about that. We do heart surgery on pipelines. So we're a global company. So we've got locations all over the world. Company's been around for over 100 years. And so we, certainly the company has seen a lot of ups and downs throughout that period of time. We've got about 1,500 employees across the globe, and we're about $500 million in revenue. So we primarily focus on oil and gas pipelines, but really the solutions and the technology that this company provides is really applicable to pipelines that of any diameter and of any product. So it's a very interesting environment to be in, and we're going to talk a little about our evolution with expense audit, where we started from, where we are today, and obviously where we're going in the future. So
now, we don't want to go back 100 years when you first started, and of course you're not a startup, but can you kind of give us a glimpse at your journey, maybe at the point of where you started to take auditing a little bit more seriously, and as you kind of progress, let's say maybe in the last 10 or 5 years, you can kind of tell us exactly where you've fallen.
So, I joined the company about 8.5 years ago, and even at that point in time, we were in the Stone Ages with regards to how we would do expenses. I think some of you, hear the term of arts and crafts expenses, right? Where receipts were getting taped to pieces of paper. You go to the copying machine, you scan it in, it gets routed to, somebody in accounting to review and code. And so, we started with that journey by putting in the Concur system to do our expenses. So that's kind of, step one, get a solid expense reporting platform out there to manage all of that. But with that, it was very clear that we had no internal audit function on expense audits, right, on expense reports. The reports were being reviewed and maybe rejected or approved, but it's all at the manager's discretion, because it would go to a manager for approval, they would sign off on it, accounting does the coding, and that was it. And so at a high level, we didn't have that insight into, well, are people following the policy? Are managers approving things consistent with policy? And so we were a little bit in the dark. And in some companies, there might be an established internal audit function to go out and do some of these things. We had none. And so that's where AppZen came into place and really started to help us perform that internal audit function, whereas in the past, it didn't exist at all.
It's interesting to hear when he said, it was up to the manager's discretion, because the discretion of one person is not the same as discretion of another. And getting everybody on that same page is really what we're looking to do. And it really goes off of the policy. We kind of want that to be our rule book, if you will. And so as each manager is different, then that means every employee kind of has a different experience. I have a really nice manager, so I might get away with things that maybe somebody else may have a difference of opinion on. Now, as you joined, let's say, AppZen, and it's been several years, there's kind of like a new process. And so let's just call it kind of that new era of expense auditing. Can you tell us, what did you need to do from your auditors, maybe the employees, to kind of follow this new adoption? Was there training involved? Was there pushback? What's kind of the inside scoop on that?
Yeah, we were able to really leverage existing employees. So we didn't have to go out and have, add resources from a human capital standpoint to go in and do the audit function, because the software did, the vast majority of that work. There was no real need for, staff to go through any mass amount of training or things along those lines. Good collaboration with, customer success managers and other folks on the AppZen team really help us, got us to a point where things were running pretty smooth very quickly. But with regards to the enforcement of the policy and kind of taking some of those inconsistencies out of different managers having different, discretions on how they would interpret policy, the way your workflow on an expense report, the way that flows through a system, that natural workflow helps to enforce the policy. Because it's going to start with the employee, turns in their report, then it's going to get reviewed by AppZen. If it finds no errors, it goes right along to the manager for approval. But when something isn't flagged and identified, whether it's, if there's some sort of high-risk item, now you have someone, you've got that human component that's looking at it, double-checking it, but it's all going back to that same, individual or small group of individuals to provide that consistent interpretation, or you send it back to the employee. Hey, did you know you're not allowed to buy this? Or you need to code this to a different expense type. And so that natural feedback loop helps employees understand that, someone is looking at my expenses and it's beyond just my direct line manager, right? And they might think it's a system, or they might think it's some outsourced team of people. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the employee thinks is going on behind the scenes. It's about that efficiency inside everyone's organization, so that you get that consistency, on the other side with once the report gets through and ultimately approved or going back for a correction.
Now, there was one interesting stat I just saw on the screen that really struck out to me, and I don't know if anyone else caught it. But with his organization, they do 9,000 reports, and there were only 3 auditors. Typically, that should scare any auditor. But as you've heard, their team was running on efficiency, there was consistency, and you're easily able to achieve that through 3 auditors if there is proper setup and there is proper adoption. Of course, when the setups are not right, that would cause then those 3 auditors to have a mountain, a pile of work, which is exactly what we want to avoid. So of course, kind of like how you saw earlier today as Anant was speaking, we want the accuracy of AI to be high, and then we want that to match your policy so that we don't overwork the auditors, of course. Now, one thing that he was talking about is, telling that employee, did you know you weren't allowed to do this? And that leads to employee behavior, which is really the root cause of everything that we discuss. If everyone's behavior was really, really well, of course, we would not be at this event and there'd be nothing to talk about, of course. But that's not real life. Can you tell us, were there any kind of specific models that might have helped you out, or anything as a use case that kind of struck out to you to improve that kind of employee behavior?
Yeah, so there's a great model out there for rental cars or rental car accessories. And so whether it's someone purchasing, say, satellite radio in a rental car, or maybe unnecessary supplemental insurance or fuel purchases, you can go in and easily identify those, and that can be flagged as, medium risk, high risk, whatever the case, whatever's most important for your organization. And you will start to develop and see those patterns and those trends. And one of the things that we've coached a lot of our employees on is, there are some rental companies out there that will magically charge a fuel fee if the rental car was driven less than 75 miles. Right? And I see a lot of heads nodding. Even if you return the vehicle with a full tank of gas, all you have to do is make sure when the employee turns the car in that they go to that counter and you have the little 5-minute discussion, make sure that charge isn't on there, right? But what happens? Employees, they're in a rush, right? They're probably, a meeting went long, they're going to miss their flight. You're lucky that they even put gas in the tank sometimes. And look, those things happen, right? That's the nature of doing business, right? Time is very important in any industry. But when you see those patterns develop, it's a quick coaching moment. And while, a small $15 charge might not seem like a lot, over lots of employees, over lots of period of times, all that stuff adds up. And all that you're trying to do is enhance your company's bottom line and save some dollars in the process, because those dollars are probably best utilized somewhere else, like buying more stuff from AppZen.
Now, the key word that I hear, and maybe I'm a subject matter expert, I'm a data nerd, I look for these things, but it's the pattern. And there are reports that are available for everybody, and it shows the pattern. And what I hate to see is we'll identify an individual and say, look at this pattern trend of like bad violations across a year. And then someone will say, well, that's okay though. Susie is no longer with us now. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, the damage is already done. You're late to the game. The question we should be asking is, how come we didn't see the patterns beforehand? And they're available. So I know with his organization, they team up with their customer success manager, and they're always talking about the patterns. And I highly encourage everybody to do the same exactly. We can spot and identify the patterns that look like an outlier before it gets to that stage where we say, what's going on here? Did you know that this person was doing the X, the Y, and the Z? We see all of that. So we can preventively stop that before it becomes a big issue, of course. Now, everyone also wants to talk about how do we get better. Most people are focused on either efficiency or, let's say, cost savings. So in order to get better, there must be some kind of change that needs to happen. Could you let everybody know, what kind of things did you focus on that allowed your improvement in efficiency?
Absolutely. The easiest thing you can look at is your auto approval rate. And so if that's not high enough for your organization, and that might vary from company to company, but we looked at items that were flagged as a high risk and that had a very high frequency of getting flagged as high risk. And we said, you know what? Is this really a high-risk item? And that's just a simple question, for whether it's you don't have to adjust your policy, but it's a question more for an audit team to ask themselves. And maybe you change it from high risk to medium risk. You don't have to change your policy. You're just changing that risk level inside of the system so that you can process those expense reports in a much more effective manner. And then if you need to run a report on a certain medium risk item for a policy review, say with HR or something like that, you can do that. We also looked at different dollar thresholds. Is this a high risk item if it's a $1 purchase? Well, maybe not. Maybe it's a high risk item if it's a $1,000 purchase for different expense types. And we also went in and tried to identify rules and exceptions when the situation made sense. So a classic example that came up in our group, we had a lot of IT professionals out purchasing different computer hardware, different peripherals for computer devices, keyboards, mice, monitors, all that kind of stuff. And for someone in IT, that's an appropriate business expense, right? But it shouldn't be, someone in accounting shouldn't be out buying, a brand new set of monitors every other day. So we went in and said, okay, well, if all of our IT, professionals are in this certain, department, then there might be an exception for this particular type of unauthorized expense item for those individuals. And so when you go through and do all that, all you're trying to do is increase that auto approval rate to a level that your organization is comfortable with, so that you can obviously process those reports as efficiently as possible. That's how you're able to get through a large volume with a very few number of auditors.
Now, for the group of people that are existing customers, there's one takeaway I hope everyone can have, and it's that you should focus on what matters. And in the session earlier, we heard what you say versus what you do are always different. You say this is important, but the data shows it's not that important. So always ask yourself, if you flag something 100 times at your desk, and if it gets approved, is it really that important? And so there are programs that we have in place to look for this, and we can give recommendations. We do not expect everyone here to be data experts, My team is in the back over there. They are data experts. They know your business maybe better than everyone here already because we can see what's the underlying source in that data transaction. So we can tell you if you're looking to get more efficiency, we can give those recommendations. However, it is up to you to accept or reject those recommendations. If we do nothing, naturally, nothing will improve, obviously. If anything, things will get worse because employee behavior, as we'll see, it always tends to go down. Employees don't just wake up and choose to be more compliant, of course. Now, I know that you're getting involved in some new areas, so reporting is one thing that's very important to you. It should be very important to everybody. Now, I don't know how familiar everybody in the room is with Team Insights, but if you can give kind of a summary, if you will, for everybody, and what caused you to take a look at our advanced reporting tool.
Absolutely. So, so prior to having the corporate treasurer role, I was the director of financial planning and analysis. And so I've certainly seen more than my fair share of work on the budgeting, planning, forecasting, and subsequent reporting aspects of that side of the business. And so you have different reporting needs throughout the organization. And what the team intelligence framework can help you do is not just give you a report that says, you had a budget to spend $1 and you spent $5, but it'll help identify those specific issues. And as we all know, departments and who's in what department, all that stuff is dynamic, right? That changes over time. That changes maybe every month, every week, depending on your organization. And so you need reports that are very automated in nature, that you can easily generate, that don't require a lot of customization, because all of that data and that customization is happening behind the scenes. And so, learning about that from our CSM, that's going to help us. Prior to that, we built out some dashboards inside of AppZen, but they were very specific, to a certain department or specific to a certain group of individuals. And so as the organization evolves over time, your reports might no longer work. Team intelligence obviously fixes those issues, and you have something that's very repeatable over time. And we're also looking at getting into the world of accounts payable, in solving some of those solutions of manual data entry. So I know a lot of people in this room are already doing that inside of their organizations. We're going through a very long overdue ERP replacement project, and so when we kind of get over that hump, we'll be evaluating what we can do with AP to really bring more efficiency to the organization as well.
So one thing I wanted to add also with Team Insights, it's not just reporting that gets emailed out to you, but it's delivered reports that are important to your specific team. There's a main difference, just so everyone can get educated on the exact tools that we have. There's general reporting that kind of tells you what your entire organization does, but that might not be pertinent to you because you might not care about the entire company, but you're focused on just your team of directs that you're responsible for. So it specializes on what is your specific team doing, what is their behaviors, what is their performance like, and then it also allows you to drill down. So when we say, hey, there's X amount of violations, and we say, well, who did that? And how much was it for? And can I double check that attachment receipt? That's what allows you to kind of go into that deeper layer. Now I know there's also one area that you're looking at. It was, I'm gonna go back one side. It was card audit. Yeah. And I don't know how familiar everybody else is with card audit, but it's the ability to still do auditing, but it's without the use of an expense report. And that's because we get connected directly to that credit card and that bank. So as I swipe my card and get that coffee, and it goes to the bank in 24 hours, we can have direct access, and that's what card audit is. And a lot of this is to really get more visibility when it comes into violations and compliance. Could you give the audience, what were your goals of what you'd like to see through card audit? Any examples?
Absolutely. So we have a very generous policy in terms of how the deadline to submit expenses. So if, right now we're in the month of June, so our policy allows employees all the way through the end of the subsequent month. So they would have till July 31st to submit their expenses. Now with that large window on turning expenses in, you might not have insight if, say, someone went rogue, or as we kind of joked, if there's some cowboys that are out there doing things they're not supposed to do, right, on their company credit card. The card audit feature solves a lot of that, and like a lot of companies, we kind of learned the hard way. We had someone that was doing some unauthorized spend on their company card. Of course, they weren't turning in an expense report, and the card spend was not enough where, when we would do our normal reconciliations with the overall credit card statement, it wasn't large enough to make that big of a difference on a macro level, but certainly on an individual level, there was something that wasn't right. Ultimately, that employee did get terminated, and because we were a little late to catching that, we weren't able to claw some of that back from that individual, and so the company kind of had to eat some of those costs. With something like card audit, you can see that in real time, and so if there is an odd transaction that comes up, or let's say someone goes out and they purchase a business class airfare ticket and that goes against the company's travel policy. Well, if the flight hasn't taken place, they can call the airline and probably get an economy seat, right? Now all of a sudden you might have just saved $5,000 on some airfare. So it allows you to address things in more real time. You do have to get into a rhythm of, just like with expense audit, you have to get into a rhythm of looking at the data on a regular basis so that you can go out there and take some action.
I'll give you some examples, and I won't give customer names, of a scenario for card audit. And card audit is, of course, a more advanced level of audit. As he was saying, it's real time because it's connected to the bank directly. Now, let's say, for example, all of us, at the end of today, we all go to the rooftop, and I decide to buy everybody drinks. Now, yay, yes. And I'll get all the expensive stuff. Now, for my manager to see that, they would have to wait for me to create an expense report. Well, I'm lazy, and I like to take my time. You have to pay that corporate card bill every 30 days at the end of the month, all right? But I don't feel like making my expense report at the end of the month. So there's the delay right there. I could do something wild, and you won't know about it. So we're already outside of the real-time game on that. That's scenario one. But scenario two is you're all assuming that I would put that rooftop charge on my expense report. What if I feel like not doing it? And what if I quit next week? How fast, honestly, can your finance team reconciliate and find, out of my 40 lines on an expense report, what if I just put 39? How will you know? And what will your team do to kind of solve that? And like Andrew was saying, you really just eat it up. And so these are the cases that we're kind of getting involved with, is like, what are those gray areas that we just don't know about? We all assume that everyone's going to turn in an expense report. We're all being charged for expense reports also from our expense management system. But what are the cases when they don't do that, of course? And so we want to see, again, patterns. What can we identify? And doing that immediately. Now, hopefully, the employees you have aren't doing anything like too wild. Now, obviously, that's not the case. We see the data all the time. So behind the scenes, imagine you are part of a government agency. You're with a bank. What if you go to a strip club? What if you go buy 3 iPhones and you just don't tell your work and you leave? Then it becomes a really big hole to dig up. And these are now kind of the new processes and new things that we have in place to kind of solve for those areas. Now, I know we're almost at our time limit, but I did want to reserve just a few minutes. If there are any questions on any topic, does anyone want to kind of yell out? Oh, we do have one in the back. Yeah, so card audit, it doesn't need the expense report whatsoever because whatever is being swiped, that information directly, we have visibility into that.
Understood, but I guess I mean more so if an employee has really a large amount and not submitting. Do you see that? Are you tracking that?
Yes, we track all the data, all the transactions that come in. And on top of that, we start to see the merchant codes, if anyone's familiar with MCC codes. And it's not just saying, I went to Burger King and the MCC code is a restaurant. It goes a deeper layer. So here's another example. You can have non-itemized receipts. I did this all the time, by the way, at my old job. Dinner rule was $100. I would do $90 in drinks, non-itemized. You have no idea what I did. Well, this solves for that because it can now find out everything that you ordered line by line. Did I get chips and salsa or a basket of fries? It'll know that. So individually tracking exactly what was done, and when you have that setup in place, and it all depends on the vendors if they're providing that line level detail. If I go to a mom and pop shop, maybe they won't have that kind of sophistication. If you do an order, let's say through Amazon, they will have that kind of information lined out for you. So it kind of depends by the vendor, but it can see everything. And with proper setup, now you can auto approve all those transactions because we don't need an expense report. I don't need to look at it. I don't need to like grade it. Just show me the ones that are important to us now, that fall into that high risk, and a true high risk. And when I say true high risk, it means like if you have expense age 90 days and a report comes in 91 days, I don't think that's a true high risk scenario. Those all still get approved. I'm talking about the really high risk of we need to do something. Let's have a conversation because this transaction looks a little odd. Question?
So regarding the card audit, can that be configured for like an exception? So like my recruiting department, they can go ahead and purchase anything, and if they have business class tickets, that's cool.
Exactly. So just like how Andrew was saying, his IT department is allowed to buy hardware. Do we need to have a rule for hardware for everybody in the room? And it's no, you can configure that to say, well, this group is kind of omitted from that because the nature and the patterns of their spend is different than everybody else.
Is that information going to automatically fill into their concur report on the card audit? So like you said, there'll be an itemized receipt that we can see. Does that receipt then cross over?
So in this case, there are no receipts, but let's just say now, we see something and we say, well, hold on, this looks odd. Now you need to create an expense report and give the details and provide the receipts because just the electronic transfer data is causing a stop. So that's where you request the more information. So you don't just fully walk away, of course, and say, like, I'm done with expense reports. It's a halfway. If you're good, you can walk away. But otherwise, request more information. Fill it out, give us your summary, tell us what happened, give me the receipts. Now it's that like round 2 of let's evaluate. Yes, there was a question in the back.
What are some of the banks that Card Audit works with, like American Express, Bank One, you know?
It's the credit cards, and it was American Express, Discover, and Visa. Guys in the back, you can confirm or tell me, am I wrong?
Visa, MasterCard, Amex.
There you go. Thank you. And by the way, our team will be doing a session later on in the day. And so a lot of these topic points that we talk about, and I know my time is up, by the way, but I'm giving you kind of the high-level idea sets. He will go a little bit deeper and give you more discussion on exactly how does it work, what does it have in detail, so we can kind of get a little bit more information. Go ahead.
I'm trying to think about this from a financial standpoint. So if it's auto approving the credit card receipts, nothing's going to flow into concur. Is that correct?
Artine?
So the credit card transactions flow directly into AppZen. No action is taken on them. We're just giving you the information on if we flag anything as high risk from a level 2, level 3 data. If you tie it to the expense reports, it will flag it on the expense audit workbench. So if we do find something that's, let's say, unauthorized spend on level 3 data on the credit card transaction, on the expense report when it's submitted, it will get flagged.
Okay, so what I'm saying is after it's been approved, the transaction, credit card transaction, how do we, I come from a company that has a lot of call centers.
for allocation purposes. So where does that come into play with the auto approval? If the transaction's already auto approved and doesn't feed into an expense report, where does the allocation take place?
So kind of the housing, Artine, do you know, like, for like call centers, I guess, does each person have kind of their own?
No, we have call centers that are based on pursuits, deals, just all of those things, and then a whole host of different expense categories.
Mm-hmm.
They're two different processes.
Yes.
The card audit piece is coming in to give you insights on the card transaction. Where Concur is still going to continue to operate. They're still putting things on an expense report, allocating to all those call centers. Don't think of it as getting approved in AppZen. Think of AppZen receiving additional data on those transactions. So then you can decide if you want to take additional action even before that expense report is submitted.
Correct. Additional data. Do you work for AppZen? That was a great answer.
He works for a bank.
I honestly didn't know. I know my time is up. Was there one last thing?
A little more info. You can come have a demonstration of the card audit service with me over at the demo desk anytime.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot more to discuss, whether it's Team Insights, there's Coach, which Anant talked about, how it gives the recommendation from generative AI, so a lot more pieces. Let me pass, and I'll come to you right after the session. They're going to cut my mic off right now.
I'm the meeting room monitor.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining today. If there's any other questions, I'm here throughout the day, so please just grab me and we can ask any questions. And thank you very much, Andrew.
Thanks a lot.